registered who may not be here could also have it. And some of you, if you have to leave or miss anything, just send me a quick message and we will send you the recording after. Okay, so I want to start off, and you're seeing we call it Course Design Bootcamp. I specifically chose that name because what we're going to do is something that's not normally done in 2 hours. So it's going to be a little bit intense, and initially I do have to share some principles and so with you. So part of it is going to be, unfortunately, me talking to you. So I hope you don't fall asleep. It's not going to be for too long. I'm going to try to get you engaged. Now, it's a 2-part workshop. This is the first part where I'm going to introduce you to the principles and so. And then part 2 for you, which is on the 23rd, we're going to do the second part where you're really going to start to frame a course outline. So for this first workshop, by the end of it, you're not going to really, at that point, come out with a course outline, but I've put up the objectives of the session here for you to get a sense of it. Travis, you want to ask a question? No, I'm hearing you twice. So take off the, okay. All right. Yeah. Right. So I have with me here my colleague Justin Zephyrin, who is also at the CTL, and I'm Diane Turabin-Kosi. I know some of you are new. Those of you who are not so new would know me, but those of you who are new may not know me. I am a faculty development specialist at the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. So one of my responsibilities is to work with you in terms of your professional development with regard to teaching and learning. And Justin Zephyrin, who is with me today to help manage this workshop since it's virtual, is our blended learning support specialist. And Justin is an educational technologist, and he provides support specifically with regard to online tools and teaching and learning, blended learning, and teaching and learning in the online environment. So you will see there the objectives for today's session. We're going to, Justin is saying hello. We're going to really touch on the context first for course design. Some of you would have, I would have done this with some of you briefly in the orientation for new staff, but we're going to talk about that first to set the context for the course design. We're also going to look at other principles that will determine or shape how you develop your course, because course design is not something that's just ad hoc. There are principles behind it. So we're going to touch on that, and the objective by the end of this session is that you would have a good sense of how to write clear learning objectives, and we'll start you off with that to go towards writing your course outline. Any questions so far? And y'all please feel free to use the chat. Yes, Frida? You can either use the chat box or use your microphone if you have one, Frida. I saw you raised your hand. Okay, I'm not hearing anything or seeing any chat, so I'm hoping that that was a mistake by Frida, that she didn't mean to raise her hand. If, Frida, if it is that you want to ask a question, please try and put it into the chat. I see Travis is... Yes, you're supposed to hear the questions from participants if they use a microphone. If not, then we have to use the chat. Okay, so yes, and now I'm hearing an echo. All right, so before we start, let me somebody's microphone is probably on. So before we start, I want you all to, we're doing a little icebreaker. So if you look at what I have up there, we're going to look at the defining decade. I want you to use one of the tools on top. If you click on the T on top of your whiteboard, you see a big T. click on that T and then click on the whiteboard, and you'll see a little box that you could type in. So I want you to just type your name in there and something that will define a decade that's popular to you. So look, if you look the example I gave, my name is Diane, and the decade, what's popular to that decade is Pac-Man, Rubik's Cube. So somebody has to now guess when that decade was, and also do the same for themselves. So you'd have to type your name, and so Justin, you do one to start off to show people, and then you all could just jump in. So, all right, so somebody has put the 1980s. So put your name as you type something. Put your name and then either type the elements that will define the decade, the specific decade that you're thinking of. Right, Grace, and you have to do it use the T tool, the text tool, and do it on the slide itself. So, for instance, you type your name like that, Grace Ann, and then you put World Trade Center bombing. So only Grace Ann so far has put something. Could the other people jump in? Kimberly Ann, oil boom in Trinidad. Margaret, Hello Kitty. All right, so Kimberly Ann, I would say 1970s. Somebody put the decade at Margaret, Hello Kitty. Grace Ann had World Trade Center bombing. Lauren, the Bee Gees. The fire is Nelson Mandela's presidency. I see people putting up, but nobody's guessing the time. Justin put Fresh Prince. Somebody put the 90s. All right, Lauren, Bee Gees, the 70s. Hello Kitty, is that the 80s? Right, 70s. Are you all giving away age here, or you're just choosing a decade? ABBA. ABBA was 80s. I don't think ABBA was 70s. Who put up? Petra, you put ABBA. When was ABBA? Not 80s?
Yes, ABBA was 80s.
All right. Nelson Mandela's presidency, 90s. Oil boom in Trinidad. What? Platform shoes? Platform shoes. Justin doesn't know when that was. Sorry. 70s, correct. All right. Everybody put, yeah, we saw platform shoes already, 70s. Okay, everybody put something. All right. Now, the activity, even though it's meant to be an icebreaker, it's intended to help you focus on the fact that different decades, as you think about it, would have defining moments. Now, Grace Ann put World Trade Center bombing for 2000s. What do you think is missing here so far? We've had the 90s, we've had the 70s, we've had, well, nobody put the 60s. Any elements or Hi, Nicole. Welcome. What we're doing is we're asking people to put their name and something that represents a defining moment in a decade. All right. So Nicole is saying feminism. All right. And I was just saying, all right, somebody put up technology. What you mean technology? Technology from the dawn. It's gone off the page. Can you drag it across? Technology from the dawn. I can't see what the rest of it is. So I'm going to erase some of these. Right? Okay. So somebody had put technology from the dawn of something. Could you finish it? All right. I guess you don't want to finish it. So I gave you okay. Technology is what's missing. I can't read what you have there. Type it in the chat box, please. Yeah. But technology, the issue of technology in terms of our current decade, and it's something that we have to think about, and it's part of our context. So I wanted to set that up first as to start off, that we operating in a context where technology now is very much current and with us and in our faces, and we can't avoid it. All right. So that's part of our context. Now, what I want to share with you is when I talk about context for course design at UE, I'm really going to look at one level, the philosophical and pedagogical context, right? The context, the thinking behind what you're going to be doing, what's going to shape that, as well as the physical, the facilities, the students, and so on. So, in looking at that whole philosophical context, one of the things I want to share with you is this whole idea of the 21st century learner. So, I'm going to put in the chat box a link to a video. The video is just about 2 minutes. All right. So, click on the link, look at the video. We're going to set the timer for 2 minutes and a few seconds. And when we come back, we're just going to have a quick chat about that. So, that's the link there. Click on it and look at the video, 2 minutes. Travis, you'll have to put your headset on. Yeah. Yeah, so just about 2 minutes, and then we come back and we have a quick chat because that's part context that we're operating in. Okay, so quick thoughts on what you saw there. Just drop it in the chat, or Lizelle, your microphone is on. Okay, so Kimberly is saying interesting. What was interesting about it? I mean, a lot of you are seasoned educators, right? Um, Anything that struck you there? Lizelle, your microphone is on. Yeah, Google is extremely powerful. Yes, it is. I know. Yeah. But I mean, some of what was said there, you feel it, you sense it. And one of the things I want to point you to is, did it strike you that some of the jobs that we knew have gone, and that there are a whole set of new jobs that are coming into place? Kimberly saying things that are taken for granted that students have been prepared for may not exist. Correct. Creativity is key. Technology is indispensable. Yes, you're all correct. And one of the things of note is in that video, and that's since 2012. It's not a very, very recent video. Since 2012, this video was put out. And one of the things that you'd notice is they were pointing to some critical kinds of skills and competencies that young people need now. And if you look at on the slide I have up there, on the left side, I have the picture of the video. And on the right side, I have a document called the UE Guiding Philosophy. And I sent you all that as a handout by email. That's one of the handouts I sent. So you could go and take a look at it, glance at it. But what I want to highlight there is that some of the skills and competencies that we at UE have included in our strategic plan, and um, in that guiding philosophy that you see on that document, really align with what they were saying in that video, and what they're saying is important for the 21st century student. So I just want to bring that to your attention, because we're saying that this is part of the context for course design within UE St. Augustine. We have to think about the fact that you're preparing the 21st century student. And I mean, we have to be even forward thinking, trying to imagine what is going to happen in society as these students leave. And we also looking at, in doing that, how do we design so that we address these skills and competencies that may be required? I'll pause here. Any questions or comments? Anything y'all don't agree with so far? Okay, so I'll take that as everybody's on board and we okay. Remember, we have the tools, my status and settings, where you could indicate, if you're not on board. Okay, so this next slide, and these documents were sent to you as handouts as well. I just put them up there so that you could be able to identify them. I see Avalon trying to type, so I'll look back into the chat in a while. This is also part of the context. Now, you all would know that we have templates on the campus, well, at the university, that we use for our course design. And it's not just a template to be bureaucratic. The templates are developed based on the principles of instructional design. And as we go along, you'll see how they align. So this is part of the context for your course design. There's a template, and the template has been derived out of instructional design. And the template is what will help guide you as you develop your courses and programs on this campus. And it's a generic um, template for course for programs as a whole and for individual courses, because the intention is, as we have the one university thrust, that when a course outline is developed here, if somebody at Cave Hill wants to use that course, you're not seeing something too far off from what they would have designed there. Okay, so I'm presenting the templates to you so that you understand it's part of the context, and also so you understand why they developed in the way they developed, why the elements that they have, because it's part of our context for course design. So you could go and look at those handouts that I would have emailed to you to browse through to see what are the elements in these templates. You don't need to do it now because we're going to take a closer look at the templates in the second workshop. But I'm just presenting them to you so you understand the context and why we are using them. It's something that was thought through, so it's not just a bureaucratic process. It is based on instructional design. Okay. Everybody has the handouts though. Anybody not familiar with what I'm talking about, I would have emailed it to you. You should have gotten them twice. Email from me, Diane Turab Kosi, to your whatever email you used to register for the workshop. And you would have also gotten it from the official workshop email. So anybody who didn't get it, raise your hand, please, so I'll know so we could get it to you, because you will need them to refer to. Okay, all those who got it, raise hands. Right. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. LK5515, what's your name? Margaret. All right. Thank you. Lauren, you didn't get it. Okay. Did you check your email again to see if you got an email from me? Okay. Well, we'll email it to you. All right. So we'll email it to you, Lauren. You'll get it before the end of the session. Okay. Yeah, you'll get it. You'll get it before the end of the session. All right. So moving on. Right. So what I want to do now is to talk a little bit about student-centered versus instructor-centered approach to teaching. And I'll explain to you why I want to touch on that before we even get into course design a bit deeper. Because remember, we're talking about context for course design before you even get into it. And part of that is you thinking about your own philosophy for teaching and learning. All right. What drives your approach? And in our heads, a lot of us, we teach either in the way we were taught or how we didn't want to be taught. Okay. And so I want to share a short video, another 4 minutes quickly, to set the context. And then I'll get into, again, a little bit about the student-centered versus teacher-centered approach. So I'll do the same thing where I'm going to share the link. The video is just about 4 minutes. These are very short. And you go you look at the video and then come back and take some comments on it. Somebody's microphone, Avalon, your microphone is on. Okay, so 4 minutes and then we come back in the room.
Can you put it back on, the link?
Okay. Chat.
All right.
Hello everyone. In this presentation, I will talk about the changing scenario in education in the face of rapidly changing world of information and the economy that requires critical and innovative thinking.
Your microphone is on.
That today's students learn in ways that are different from how we learn. The question that we are going to examine is, how can tradition We are all too familiar with the traditional classroom scenario. Teachers
San. People are still watching the video, so we giving like a few seconds. Okay, so most of you should be done or almost done. Let's see, Travis, you're done? Yes? Yes. Okay. All right. So initial reactions, as I always like to get. Um, initial reactions to that video. Now, we're not shoving anything down anybody's throat. All right. How do we facilitate the student-centered learning with the current lecture style setup of our classrooms? Okay. That's a good question, Grace-Ann. And we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Particularly in part 2. It's a very valid question, though. And the short answer is we have to try to find creative ways to work around that. So the question then would be, what are the creative ways we could work around that? Students should be more active in the learning process. Yeah, they should be. But how can we get them to be more active? And in terms of our own headspace, are we ready and are we prepared? And do we design our courses to facilitate this? So I want to do a quick poll. Just yes or no response. So when the poll comes up, you'll see it. And I want you to say, is student-centered teaching part of your philosophy, your mindset? Do you feel that you want to have that student-centered approach as described in the video? So the poll will come up and I just want you to give a yes or no response. Is student-centered teaching part of your philosophy? All right, so we have 11 yeses and 4 people who have not responded yet. See, Grace-Ann is typing something. And so the idea is if in your philosophy of teaching, student-centeredness is part of that, then as I'm saying, you're thinking of a context. We're looking at what are the needs of the students, and you're saying you want the student to be at the center. Well, as you design, you have to have at the back of your head, how do you get the students to be more active in the process? All right? How do you get students to be more active in the process? And I see several people are typing. So I'm going to move to the next slide, but I'll keep my eye on the chat box. So when it comes up, we could respond to that. So the next objective then is, if we're talking about course design, right, it is part of a process that's in a field of study called instructional design. And you are operating as course developers in that context. Now, I know you already don't think about it in that formal kind of way. You're thinking that you're a lecturer and you come and you're an expert in your field and you come to impart that knowledge to the student. But when we talk about course design, there's another role you have, and that's the hat you have to wear, of course, developer, and that requires maybe another set of skills that we're asking you to have. That some of you may have it already based on the years of experience in teaching, but you could build on that. And there are others who are now coming in who you have to realize that this is another hat that I'm going to be wearing. Okay. So we're going to talk a bit about instructional design, and I've just put up a textbook definition there so that you understand that it's really not an ad hoc activity. It's a systematic process, and it's used in training a lot and in education for those of us who've gone through teacher training or lecturer training. Um, Instructional design refers to that systematic process where you apply principles that will allow you to end up with a consistent and reliable program, or at least it's supposed to, um, if it's followed through. And some of the characteristics of instructional design I put up there on that slide, and I want to highlight in particular this team. Because even though it might feel as if you're operating as one person, you're the lecturer, you're in fact part of a team. And that team in the UE context refers to your department, your faculty, like the CTL, and all those committees and groups that are responsible for ensuring the quality of what you do and for shaping what you do. So even though you, as the individual lecturer, will have a very heavy role in developing a course, it's being developed with a team, because you're not going to get your course approved for delivery unless you deal with your department, your faculty, and all the various committees and units that are responsible for reviewing and helping you with that. So going through the instructional design process and working as part of a team is very much among the principles of instructional design, and is intended for you to have that kind of quality course. You're not alone. And as the course developer and the course designer, I like to present RC. Grace, I'm not sure what you're asking there. Such as, oh, you're talking to Travis. Travis, Grace is asking you activities such as, because you have put in the chat, by designing activities that would facilitate self-directed learning. So Grace Ann is asking you what kinds of activities, right? And as you all talk about the kinds of activities, the slide I have up there gives you that role of director, okay? You have to actually manage the process, starting with the conceptualization of the course, the planning, the development, and the implementation. Right? So instructional design is a process. That's the point I'm trying to get at here. And there are various models that help map out that process. And so the next step we're going to look at is the stages in the course design process based on this instructional design model. And I'm going to use a specific instructional design model. Everybody with me so far? Lost anybody yet along the way? I'm going to pause so you could just let me know what's happening. Questions, comments? Right. So Kimberly, you're following. Right. Good. Just want to know I'm not talking to dead air. I mean, I see Travis here, so I know Travis is on, and I know Grace is on. So I just want to be sure that everybody else is on. Right. And you see, I'm taking you all through the stages. I'm taking you all through a process here. So we haven't started actually going into design. We're going into the principles behind it. I always feel people need to know the rationale behind what they're doing. So you're not just doing it because the university says you have to do this. This is in fact part of a process that's been tried and tested. So the model I have up there is the ADDIE model, right? That's just one among many instructional design models. And I've used that model because it's really like a foundational model. And if you look at it, you see like a cycle there, ADDIE, and it's like a cycle. And the first stage is your analysis, where you try to derive what are the needs, what is it I want, what is it the stakeholders want, what is it the students want, what's my context. That's what the analysis involves. So analysis is the first stage of course design, and we all do it to some extent, even though it might be a quick and dirty form of analysis. It might be looking at what the class was like before, it might be looking at society and what we think the needs of societies are, or it could be something even more formal. And when you look at the program templates, the templates for programs, the program proposal templates, you will see that one of the things they ask you for is a market analysis. That's the A part. That's your needs assessment. All right. So the A is the first stage, analysis. Then you go on to the design stage. So once you move from the analysis, you know what your needs are, or you have an idea of what you want to get at. The next stage is design. And that's where you determine what are your objectives based on the needs that you have assessed. What are the objectives for this program or course that you're working on? How are you going to deliver it? What are the activities? And this is where your thought, Grace and Travis were jumping ahead and talking about the kinds of activities that could engage students. That's where you do that brainstorming when you get to that design stage. And that's really pegged to your objectives. Okay, depending on your objectives and your context, you can then work on your activities, because as Grace is saying, if you're operating in a context, physical facilities where things are bolted to the floor and you have an auditorium with 300 students, how do you get that engagement? So that's why you have to sit down based on your context, the needs of the students, and work out the kinds of activities. So that's a design stage. Development stage is where you develop you've worked out a plan, and you know what materials you need, what readings, what you collect your materials, and you could even have a draft of your course that you'll try out on your colleagues or a small group of students, or you do a pilot of it. That's a development phase. And then your implementation phase is when you actually deliver the course. The course is delivered, and the next stage would then be you've delivered your course, so now you want to evaluate your course. So I'm saying that course design from you as a lecturer should really involve all these stages, straight from analysis to evaluation at the end, where you give your students some kind of tool or some form of evaluating that experience and the learning, which your assessments would determine. And then you determine, okay, what adjustments do I need to make? And you start all over again. Now, it's not saying that you're going to rewrite your course outline, but it's saying that you may look at tweaking your activities, your readings, the things that you could change within that 5-year period before it's time for you to revise that course. And you collect your data, your information, so that when it's time to revise the course, you know what you need to change and you start the process all over. So I'm going to pause again. Questions, comments? Think of that process, the ADDIE model, applying the ADDIE model to your course design. Waiting to hear. Did I lose you all? I only know Travis is here. Austin. Rita, you're here. What you think of the process? Right. So earlier you heard of ADDIE before. Good. Excellent. Nicole, you got bumped off, but we were talking about the ADDIE model. Did you hear anything? Are you familiar with the ADDIE model? And there are different models. I presented the ADDIE because that one is the most straightforward, and it's sort of like a foundational model. But the idea behind it is that you have a structured approach to course design. Right. So I'm going to move on. Right. And so we started off with the first stage analysis stage, and I set the context at UWI St. Augustine, presented some elements to you for you all to consider in terms of the broader context, what's going on in terms of 21st century student, some of the elements of our strategic plan that align with that. And we talked about student-centered learning. And so if we're talking about the needs analysis, and you know that that means if you're doing a program proposal, it goes beyond just the student. You're looking at the needs of the society, global needs, and so on. But you as a lecturer, if you're looking at developing one specific course, one of the critical things you need to consider is, who is my student? So you have to do some element of student analysis. And so another handout I sent to you is the student analysis, quick and dirty student analysis. All right. For the student analysis, you need to ask yourself some questions, some quick questions. All right. Let me put up that slide, that handout, student analysis. You should see it on the whiteboard in a couple seconds. Right. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Okay. So everybody should have this, should have gotten this by email. Now, most of you will say, well, we don't have the time to do a student analysis, and then the students are coming in. It doesn't make sense because by the time they come in, you have to start the course. I'm saying that you could do quick and dirty student analyses, and that you could do your student analysis in a way that it would inform courses further down the road, okay, in the future as well. And some of the quick things that you'd want to know about your students are, what are the skills, the experiences, the attitudes that they have that will impact on teaching learning situation. Would they be coming in saying that we don't like group work, we don't like this online thing, we don't want to do any activities, the lecturer asking us to present and the lecturer wants us to do his or her work, we don't see why we have to do this? Is that the kind of student that you're getting? And is it that you're getting them because that's what they're used to? So how does this impact on your course design? Do they have prior knowledge of the area? Do you know? Where are they coming from? Do they have access to facilities that you need them to have access to? What are their ability levels? What are their learning preferences? What are some of the characteristics? So basically, I'm saying you have to try to find out as much as you can about your students. So I'll give you, for example, for this workshop, when you register, we ask you about where you are, what department, how you classify yourself. So we have a sense of the range. And for this particular workshop, we have a broad range. We have people who are very experienced. We have people who classify themselves as novices. So the workshop has to take account of all of that. So I know some of you would be familiar with some of what I'm saying. Um, and some of you wouldn't. So Frida is saying she would look at CVs, and that's a good idea, depending on, and of course, all of this depends on the department that you're in, the faculty that you're in, the level of the students. So you would have to work out how best can I get the information that will help me as I develop these courses. And remember, the university also has a unit, a planning unit, the campus office of planning and institutional research, and you could get generic information about the students in terms of demographic profiles and some of the skills and so on that they're coming in with. So that's also a useful tool for the undergrads in particular. So just wanted to share that. So I'll pause again. Questions, comments on student analysis? You all are very quiet. You still there? Okay, I see one person still here. Right, you all are still there? Right, you're following. Good. Okay, just want to make sure that people didn't fall asleep. Um, right. So this slide, and unfortunately, Blackboard sometimes messes up the slide. So it should really look like a pyramid, and at the top, I have assessments, strategies, and content. That's what you are not seeing there. But what I want you to get from this diagram, at the base you will see, and you see I put in the ADDIE elements along the side. So your analysis, we need that student needs and context as part of your analysis, because that is then going to feed into the aims. Aims, and then out of that, your broad aims, you will then be able to derive your objectives and your learning outcomes. Now, I use objectives and learning outcomes interchangeably, but you could also consider objectives as general objectives for a course or a program, and your learning outcomes are more specific. All right. And we'll talk about the learning outcomes in the next slide. But I wanted you to see that it's a process that you're building on. So you have your context, and your context is framing, you're helping to frame your aims and objectives, and that will be part of your design and development. And then based on your objectives and your outcomes, your aims, you would then be able to tease out your teaching strategies, the content that you're going to be delivering, and your assessment. So what we think is generally you don't start off, it's not the best practice to start off saying the students have to know this and the students have to know that. And when I was in university, we had to do this, so they have to do that. The approach we want you to take is backwards design, where you're saying, based on our needs assessment and so on, what we would like our students coming out being able to do and know and apply are these things. And if we are to get them to be able to do and know and apply these things, then these are the strategies that we adopt if we're student-centered. This is the content that we will pull from, and this is how we will assess them, so we will know that they've learned. Right? And so the key then, if I go back to this, if we're saying the next step is the objectives and learning outcomes, if you want to get to the top here, this part, right? I was trying to draw an arrow, by the way. If you're trying to get to this top part, then you need to have very clear outcomes or objectives. So how do you do that? How do you do that? So the first thing I want to share is what we calling a learning objective or an outcome. And it's basic. These there again, textbook definitions. Look at it simply as a description of the performance you want the students to exhibit. What is it you want the students to be able to do at the end of the instruction or whatever, right? Straightforward. That's basically an outcome. So an objective, a learning objective or a learning outcome is a statement that describes what the student will be able to do at the end of the course or the training or the intervention or whatever. And so to write a learning objective, you have to ask yourself, given the needs and all that and the context, what is it I want my student to be able to do, to demonstrate that they have learned? And the most basic way of writing an objective is, we say that the objective has certain parts. And so the most basic way is you first write the who, which is the student. So you start off with a phrase that says, after completing this course or workshop or program, the student should be able to, and some people ask, should we say should we say will? We tend to say should because you don't know if for all your best efforts the student will. I mean, when you put all things in place, they should be able to. So that's why we use should. But some people use will. So don't get into the semantics of it. but our template has should. So the student should be able to, and this is one example, identify ways to control food costs and quality. Now, so the who or the audience is the student, and then you always need some kind of action. What is it you want the student to be able to do? And in this case, you want the student to be able to identify what? And the next thing is your content reference. So in this case, you want them to be able to identify ways to control food cost and quality. So when we look at that objective, we have in our head that the expectation is that the student will be exposed to some kind of content on controlling food costs and quality. And at the end of it, we want to see that they could identify that. So that is a very basic learning outcome, right? There's a more complex way of arriving at a learning outcome, which is called the ABCD method. Some of you who are more seasoned in the thing would have met this before, the ABCD approach. And it's saying that every learning objective or learning outcome must have an audience who is the learner, right? An audience who is the learner, which is the student or the participant, whoever, must have the behavior or observable action. And that's why we say you use a particular word, a verb that will be clear and almost measurable. And we'll talk about how you arrive at that word in a while. The condition under which the learning will occur, right? And that would depend on the field you're in. So you set up what kind of conditions you want that behavior to take place in. And then you have the degree or the criteria that of minimum acceptable performance standard. And that's a more complicated approach to writing the objective. But the elements to take note of is the audience and the behavior for sure. You must have at least the A and the B in a learning outcome. Now, some of the things I want to bring your attention to is you're trying to avoid vagueness in your learning outcome when you're designing a course. And the reason why you want to do that is the less specific your objective, the more difficult for the student to follow, and the more difficult for you to arrive at a targeted. Yes, I'm using the mic, Grayson. So if you're not hearing, I'm not sure why, because the mic is on. Anybody else not hearing? Grayson says she's not hearing. Could I just see a quick show of hands? Those of you hearing? Okay. All right. So Grayson, is something with yours. Thank you. Okay, so vague learning outcomes. I'm going to pause. How many of you have seen in a learning outcome, the student should be able to know something, or the student should be able to understand something? Yes, Avalon. Good. Yes, you have seen it. Now, if you're writing very general objectives, you could say that by the end of the course, the student should be able to understand XYZ. But the learning outcomes, the specific learning outcomes, yes, understand and so on can be used in aims or general objectives. Those are very broad, and they will encompass several aspects that would then be broken down into your learning outcomes. So we're saying that know, understand, learn, be familiar with, and those kinds of words are left for very broad, maybe your aims. But when we're talking about your learning outcomes, they have to be specific. And how do we get them to be specific? How do we select the words that would make it specific? And we go to your various taxonomies, what we call taxonomies of learning. One of the most popular one is Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom put forward this principle that you have various learning domains. You have the cognitive domain, which deals with knowledge. And if you look at the slide there, so under the cognitive domain, we're talking about recalling data, understanding, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating. All of that is part of knowledge, the thinking things. You have a domain called the affective, where you're trying to look at getting people to learn things related to attitudes, right? And so Bloom is saying in that domain, you're looking at awareness, reaction, understanding, personal value system. So when you get into ethical things and principles and those kinds of things, you're looking at the affective domain, the touchy-feely things, not so much the thinking things, but thinking in a way that has to do with, um, you know, personality and behavior that has to do with attitudes. So that's the affective domain. And then you have the psychomotor domain, manipulation, hands-on things. So if you're doing software training, a lot of that is skills-based, and that is in the psychomotor domain. If you're teaching defensive driving, things like that. So Bloom is saying you have these domains of learning. And within these domains of learning, and I'll use the cognitive as the main example. So for instance, the cognitive domain, Bloom is saying that you have almost a hierarchy, although you're not saying that one is better than the other. You're saying that people may need to learn in all of these domains, in all of these areas. And Bloom, on the left side, this was Bloom's original taxonomy, where he's saying you move from knowledge, which is at the base, where you're asking people to recall information, to learn information. Then you go up to comprehension, where they actually process what they have recalled and what they've identified, and they now at the level of understanding. And then you move to application, then analysis, synthesis, evaluation. One of Bloom's proteges developed on Bloom's taxonomy and kind of adjusted the domains to remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So so the principle behind this is when you are designing your course and you're selecting learning outcomes and you're going to look for the verb that you want to use, depending on the level of the course, you would want to ensure that you have a mix of learning outcomes. So you don't only want learning outcomes that fall into the bottom there, remembering. Depending, if it's a level 3 course in particular, you would want to have learning outcomes where students are evaluating, creating, analyzing, and not just identifying and describing information. Now, how do you get the right verbs to arrive at the learning outcomes that would fall into these domains? And that's where another handout I gave you, as well as if I go back here, if you look at the bottom of this slide, there is a URL, which I will send to you all in a while. But there's also the handout. Let me just put that handout up. Effective use of performance objectives for learning assessment. And I've used not just the Bloom, this uses not just the Bloom, but also one called Think. Let me just make this a little bit bigger for you. And everybody should have this handout. This is one that was sent to you. And at the front of the handout, it's talking about what are the key components of a learning objective. And then if you look at the second page, this is Fink's taxonomy. It's not Bloom, but the principle is almost the same, where Fink has here foundational knowledge, understanding, and remembering. These are some of the words that you can use to develop your learning outcome. So by the end of the course, the students should be able to list, recognize, name, paraphrase. So the idea is to use one of the taxonomies as a reference point to get the right verb that will identify the specific behavior you want the student to display. I'm going to pause. As I pause, I'm going to put the link for Bloom's taxonomy in the chat box, so you'll see some of the verbs that Bloom Bloom suggests. So just as I pause, you can put any comments or questions in the chat box while I get that that taxonomy for you all. Questions, comments? You all are very quiet. I hope you're processing. I hope you're processing. Processing, okay. Yes, you could use it for Ames Earl, but they tend to be specific. Okay, so the business balls link, let me just click on it. I put it in the chat box. If you click on that business balls link in the chat box, it takes you to Bloom's taxonomy, and you could scroll down the page and you will see in the cognitive domain the kinds of words that you could use, and so on and so on. Yeah, so Candace is thinking about it. Right. So the lists are supposed to help you come up with the words, because sometimes you're thinking of a word, you're saying, okay, what is it I really want the student to be able to do here, right? And you just can't find that word. So it helps you determine if it's in the area of critical thinking, if it's practical thinking, if it's creative thinking, and so on. Right, so let me go back now. So you have this handout and you have the link to Bloom. Yeah, the Think taxonomy is you have that as a handout. It's called effective. I sent it to you by email. It's called effective use of performance objectives for learning and assessment. It's there, right? Okay, so we're pressing on now. So now what I want to do. Yes, that's it. Correct. That's it, Kimberly. Right. So we've done all of this. So now I want to give you all an activity. You're going to go into groups. Okay, you're going to go into rooms and groups. Now, when you go into the rooms, you will not be able to see the whiteboard, this whiteboard. So what I do, when I put up the 2 objectives, I want you to just note them quickly. And I'll put them in the chat box as well. No, but if I put them in the chat box, you wouldn't see that either. So I want you to just note these quickly, right? These objectives, because you're all going to be put into groups in rooms, so you won't be able to see me or this whiteboard. And I want you in your groups, you're looking at these 2 objectives there. One is state the principles of salad making, and one is understand food hygiene. Right? I am going to give you all 15 minutes. 15 minutes, and for you all to look at these 2 objectives, and based on all my talking for the morning, I want you to kind of critique these, right? And suggest revisions if you think necessary. So based on what we've talked about, you have the list of verbs. So imagine you are working in CTL and you have a course outline to review, and somebody has given you a course outline with these 2 learning outcomes. As course developers yourself, or you are sitting in the Academic Quality Assurance Committee meeting, and a course outline comes with these 2 objectives, what would you say as your comment on these? So do it in groups, so you all will discuss it in your groups, and then we'll come back in 15 minutes, Justin, in 15 minutes to the bigger group and share. Okay, so you just give us a couple seconds to put you all into groups, and then we'll filter between the groups just to make sure everybody's okay. But please just take note of the comments in the meantime. of the two. I'll put it in the chat box, and then you all could just copy it from the chat box. I'm going to put it in the chat box in 2 minutes. Yeah, washroom break. And you could take a quick washroom break if you need it in the meantime as we do that. Let me put it, I'm going to put it in the chat box now. Okay, so it's in the chat box. Just quickly copy paste it onto a Word document or something on your computer. And so when you go into the room, you can have it. All right, so just give us a few seconds. Yeah, go ahead. There's no way for you to warn them. Okay. There's no way for you to warn people that they're coming back. It's almost like you transport people and then hello everybody. I know this is weird. It's like we transport you like Star Trek and then we beam you back without any notice. But there's no way for me to unless I come into each group and say, we're gonna come back in 2 minutes to warn you. So sorry about that. The unceremonious throwing back into the main room. But the time has gone, and I wanted us to have some time to discuss what you all did. I know you may not have had an opportunity to do both. If you did, that's great. If not, that's okay. Um, so we'll go. I hope you all appointed one person to speak on behalf of the group. If you didn't, if you could quickly, somebody could quickly volunteer on behalf of the group to speak. So we start with the first one comment, and if somebody says something about it that everybody else found, you don't need to repeat it. Just add to anything that they would have said. So state the principles of salad making. I want to get any group to share how you critique this, what you came up with. Anybody could jump in first. Okay, Paula, I'm hearing that you have been volunteered to say something. Sorry. Or from the group chat, if you could access your comments, can they access their comments from the group chat? It's gone, sorry. Sorry, Paula. Sorry. Sorry about that, Paula. You can't remember what y'all said? Everyone. Okay, Kimberly. Okay. Next time I'll be sure to tell you, I'll copy paste your comments so that you could put it into the group. All right. So Avalon, I take it that you are right. You thought that state was only testing knowledge. That is, let me just go into everyone. Yes. Identify and describe the principles of food hygiene and evaluate how this can be achieved when making salads. Avalon, is that how you all are revising it? You all thought state was only testing, so you, oh, okay, Paula, no. Avalon, do you have access to a microphone so you could share what you're explaining there? Right, so Travis and they used explain rather than describe. Kimberly saying that it was too vague and general, correct? You changed it to the student should be able to apply the principles of salad making to prepare a 3-ingredient salad. Right, so let's pause a minute and dissect that that Kimberly's post there. Nicole is saying you all prefer describe, list, or explain to the word state. So I think everybody agreed that the word state they found a bit vague, and that's fine. Now Kimberly has a revision there. Let's take a look at that. Kimberly has the student, which is the audience, should be able to, and the word that they've used in the chat is apply the principles of salad making. So it's apply is the word, and principles of salad making, which is the content, to prepare a 3-ingredient salad. So there's a condition there. It's a 3-ingredient salad. So the conditions under which they're going to do it. All right. Now, the thing to note with that is Kimberly and they have moved to application. Now, the lecturer might say, I didn't want application. I want just basic knowledge. I want it to be. So in that case, if we go down to Nicole and they, with their describe list to explain, that word would be better suited, one of those simpler words, if the intention is just basic knowledge. If, as in Kimberly's case, you want them to prepare a 3-ingredient salad, um, and you want application, then you would need to change the word state to something a little more complex. So Earl is asking, was it testing knowledge? Well, we don't know, because remember, we just seeing these two um, objectives without the benefit of the course description, the rationale, and the rest of the course outline. So we can't be sure. You see why it's so important to see the course description and the rationale, because that will help us determine, and the other things that will tell you if it's a 3-credit course, if it's a first year course, if it's an introductory course, a standalone course. All of those things will give us guidelines as to whether it is just in the area of knowledge or if it's more than that. Right, so Kimberly wasn't sure of intent, and none of you would have been sure of intent. Right, you're just assuming because you just have this thing in front of you, right? So yeah, so it's out of context, but if we had to go with, it seems as if they're just looking at knowledge, then you'd have to choose a word that's in that domain. If when you look at the other elements, it should be at a higher level, then you would choose another word that is in a higher domain. Everybody agree? Yes. What about the second one? Understand food hygiene. Frida, you'd use describe. Okay. What y'all thought about that? If you get a learning outcome like that, the student should be able to understand food hygiene. Remember, there's supposed to be a learning outcome. Right. I think everybody would agree that's just way too vague. So if you had to take a shot at revising it, any of you did? The groups? Demonstrate an awareness of, right? Understand is more of an aim. It's hard to measure understand, correct? Apply the principles of, utilize food hygiene. But then if you say utilize food hygiene, then something is missing. Then you need conditions. You see, there are certain learning outcomes that require more than just the verb and the content. There are certain learning outcomes that will require conditions for more specificity. And when you use a word like discuss, Frida, that's also very broad, right? If you use discuss, you'll have to expand on that. Demonstrate food hygiene, but again, you would need conditions, right? Assess the techniques used in food hygiene and apply the methods to preparation of a salad. Now, Candice, you have two outcomes there because you have two verbs. So I'm glad you put that. You see, you have two verbs. So you're asking the students to assess techniques used in food hygiene. That's a set of content by itself. And then you're asking them now, after doing that, to apply the methods to preparation of a salad. So you have to be careful too when you're writing learning outcomes to ensure that it is reasonable for the student and that you would be able to assess and that you don't pack too many words into it so that you have more than one behavior. Right. So everybody get a sense of, yes, so the objective could be split into two. The objective could be split into two. And what I want you all to see too, I put you all in the groups. Now we try to mix the groups. So you have different levels of experience in the groups. And the process is when you look at it, people will react differently and you tend to discuss it, and that helps you become a little more specific. right? So course design shouldn't be a lonely activity. It should really be a team activity. So when you write your objectives, have a colleague look at it and say, does this make sense? Is this a smart objective? Right? You want to talk it through, you want to refine it, and you can do that as you work with somebody else. So when you do your course outline, you need to share it so that people can give their input. And in particular, you have people in your field look at it, but you also have people outside of your field look at it, because when you're in your field, sometimes you take things for granted. And when somebody else looks at it, they may ask you some questions that you hadn't considered because you're in the field and it seems obvious to you. But remember, a student coming in, things may not be too obvious to them because they're new in the field. So these are all the things that you have to think about. So it's not a lonely process. It's supposed to be a team process as far as possible. Avalon, I was pausing because I see you're typing. It's not coming up yet. Right. So the characteristics of learning. Oh, Avalon is not hearing. I'm sorry about that, but my mic is on. What I'll do too, Avalon, is you will get the recording so you could pick back up. I'm just typing here. Yes. Okay, so the slide you're looking at helps you to think about when you look at the outcome, some of the things you're looking for. You're looking for that specificity, so that will come as you choose the best verb possible. It should be measurable. When I say measurable, when you look at it, how will I assess this? Right? What will I ask the students to do to show me that they can do this? That's what you have to ask yourself. What will I ask my students to do to show me they can do this? It should be attainable within the scheduled time and the conditions, right? Um, it should be, hold on, Justin, are we still recording? Right. It should be relevant and results oriented, and it should be targeted at the desired level of learning. So you see how important it is for us to know what is the level of this learning so that we could target it specifically. We're going to try to wind up because I know I said 2 hours, and so people are going to be going off. So to wrap up, I'm giving you all homework because remember, this is part 1. This is just the first part, looking at how you come up with those objectives, which will be the anchor for your course design. And so I want you to think of the possible topics in your course, the needs of your students, your current context, all the things we talked about. Now, I know you all would have courses already. Some of you will be thinking about writing new courses. So either you come with, you put in the box, the chat box, think of 2 course learning objectives from either course you have or something you're thinking about. Brainstorm now. And I want at least 3 persons to share one of the objectives in the chat box very quickly. It could be something that you have already or something that you're thinking of. And just share it in the chat box now from your course. I see before I was going to type some, right. The student should be able to navigate the SPSS interface. All right, that's one. Anybody else has another one? If you get at least another one, I'm trying to see if we could finish by 12. All right, people are shy all of a sudden. Bafia is typing again. Frida is typing. Okay, good. Right. Earl, at the end of this lesson, students should be able to discuss the models used to represent spatial data. All right. Okay, so while Frida is typing, Bafia, navigate the SPSS interface. What you all think of the first one, Bafia's. Okay, so we have one from Bafia, one from Earl, and one from Paula. To understand and interpret health information and data of different countries. Oh, now we have in a rage. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy. We won't have time to look at all of them now. So I'm going to copy all of them for our next session. And I want you all to just quickly glance at what's there and give me some quick thoughts on what's there. Everybody busy typing. All right. What I'm seeing is a mix. So I'm seeing some that are very specific and targeted. I'm seeing some that are a bit broader and a little more vague. People using a lot of discuss. And I want you all to look at the word discuss and see, those of you who use discuss, see if that's the best choice for what you want. Go back and look at the taxonomies and think about what you want to achieve and see if discuss is the best word to get it. Differentiate between various types of things is fine. Applying principles is fine. Use computational methods to access and analyze something is fine. Kimberly, think about understand and interpret as learning outcomes. Think about whether it's specific enough. Use language flexibly and effectively for social, academic, and professional purposes, right? And the word is use. And of course, if you add something like flexibly and effectively, when you come to assess, you need to have a rubric that defines how you will assess flexibility and effectiveness in the context, right? So that's just some quick reactions to those outcomes that you've put. But the point I want to make here is it's an ongoing process. Don't ever think that the learning outcome might be perfect at the first go. You need to review it, rethink, think of the context, think of the levels, think of the courses, think of if this is the best word. So it's a process that you go through of reviewing and revising in the same way you looked at the examples I gave you. So homework now, because I want us to have a little time to wrap up. I didn't get the evaluation link, Justin. You could ask. Yeah. So if you look, we have a homework for part 2. Now it doesn't have to be 8 objectives. I put 8 objectives there. But what I would want you to have for the next session is, I'll come to your question in a while, Paula. For the next session, I want you all to write your course description, or if you already have a course that you're using, to come with the course description and about 4 to 8 learning objectives that go with that description. That will be the start of your course design. So I want you all to bring that for the next session. It's also an online session. Grace Ann, can you hear me? I wonder if Grace Ann is hearing me, because I see she's posting something and I know she couldn't hear before. Okay, I'll check. Yes. So, Grace, and the recording will be made available by tomorrow. And Paula, is it okay that the course aims are broader than the lesson aims? Yes, your course aims are supposed to be broader than your lesson aims. So Paula is making the distinction between course plan, lesson plan. Kimberly, yes, if you're leaving the slides and they will be part of the recording, so you'll get that. Please come with your homework for the next Thursday, which is your session. I think is the 20. I can't remember what is part 2 for this one. But you'll get a reminder. So you need to come to part 2 to be able to complete the course design. And yes, so I'm going to send you all a link for the evaluation. Please, please, please complete the link. Those of you who've gone, you'll get it by email. The rest of you, I'm putting it in the chat box now, so don't leave yet. Grace didn't hear anything. Okay, I'm going to put it. Oh, they said it. Can you remind them to check the email addresses? Right. So the evaluation is in your email. Please complete it for me. 8 objectives for one course seems quite a bit. No, Travis, some courses have 8 objectives. It doesn't have to be 8. It could be less. But some courses have, people tend to write more, particularly like math and so on. They have 14, 12, 10. So that's why we said 8. So don't go for more than 8. Right. So before you go, those of you who are still here, any aha moments you want to put into the box, the chat box? It could be anything that you didn't think about before, or something that you'd like to hear the next time that you're not sure if I'll cover. I'll be grateful, and please complete the evaluation. And once you do I don't have the link. He didn't send it to me. He just sent saying that, yeah. Please just check to see whether their evaluation link is working. If it's not, just email me and let me know, please. He's now going into his email. So please, yes. Oh, I think he exited. He exited. Okay, folks, bye. See you all next week. Okay, PBR worked. PPR worked. Bye, Lorraine. Bye, bye. See you all next week. Bye, Nicole. Bye, Paula. Okay, I'm just going to close out the